We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Master Your Life, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining host and her guests give practical advice that you can use every day in the quest to master your life. Now, here's your host, Leaha Mattinson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm host Leaha Mattinson, and first of all, I want to start out by thanking everyone from all over the world for joining us for this episode of Master Your Life. It's my absolute pleasure and delight to once again welcome to the show Tim Dixon. Tim, welcome to today's podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good. So Tim is the CEO, founder of Therapeutic Solutions, and is being brought to you by Community Shield. So anyone who wants more information about Community Shield, about Therapeutic Solutions, can come to masteryourlife.ca. What we're going to be talking about today with Tim is depression and suicide, and how we can, first of all, see those things maybe in advance, and then how can you actually treat them? Tim, these are really pressing issues, I think more so now than ever. I've been a counselor and a coach for well over, it's actually 3 decades now. And, in 1991, when I started out as a counselor in a small, rural, isolated school division, what I saw in kids and adults was not a lot of depression, the occasional depression and the occasional, manifestation of suicide. But now, flash forward 30 years later, we're supposed to be more able to manage our wellness, and it doesn't seem like we're doing a very good job of that. And it's important for people to understand that when suicides happen in families, I think a lot of people have taken it personally, like the family has done something wrong. In the Huntington's disease community, where I'm a part of that community, the rate usually is about 7 times higher than the general population for suicide. So it's been on my heart and mind for many years. What is it that we can do to, first of all, understand what's going on in the brain and not to think about it as a personality disorder or problem or weakness? And then how do we actually have a solution that isn't just, I've got to behave better, I've got to think better thoughts, when the brain is the thing that is conspiring against us. And so very excited to talk with you today about your perspective and knowledge and wisdom about all of that.
Yeah, well, it certainly is timely because, we've been in this pandemic for quite a while now, and we have a sort of, it's cyclic, right? It seems we're certainly in some strange wave here in the United States right now with this Delta variant. And what we're seeing in that model is a rapid increase in not only suicide, but in the ideation. I mean, we have young people, 12 years old, that are committing suicide out of fear of this pandemic or whatever it is, right? Whatever is driving that. And it's more than a tragedy. It's becoming epidemic, right? It's tragic when it's in your family, it's a loved one. It is, but we're seeing this on a great scale now. And so it's more than just tragic, it's epidemic. And there's something driving it. And these people are not all born crazy, okay?
Right.
So our opinion is that schizophrenia and the suicidal ideations that may come from that. And some people have suicidal ideation without any schizophrenia at all. They have a cancer diagnosis and they become suicidal over it, right? Just the thought of it. But what is really driving that? You said the brain is sort of the communicator here in this, right? In the quiet of the night, when we're alone, in the dark of the night, it's our brain that's talking to us, right? How we interpret that, and whether if, oh my gosh, we ever share what our brain said to us in the night with another soul, is maybe at the heart of that as well, that people aren't talking about these things that they are experiencing in the quiet of their mind when they're alone, or sometimes even in the middle of a huge crowd, right?
Yeah, great
Our
point.
position is that it's all biological and it's immunologically driven, and that we've been able to, at least at our, we have a subsidiary that specializes in this, in suicidal ideation and schizophrenia, called Campbell Neurosciences. And our work there, we've been able to identify, and with specificity and sensitivity, detect certain proteins that are in the blood that are markers of suicidal ideation. In fact, we can detect these markers before a person has actually even had the thought. We can see these in an early stage where we've already completed a phase 1 clinical trial in this. We're gearing up right now to do phase 2. That'll have 10 times the number of patients in it. But what we found out was, with this marker that we've identified, in patients who, in this clinical trial, who actually acted upon their suicidal ideation. So what I'm getting at is, in the middle of the trial, these patients, under the care of a psychiatrist, attempted suicide. And we analyzed their blood. And we found out that the biomarkers that were in their blood, as compared to our control group that had no suicidal ideations, had no history of any of that, right? Were immunologically healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy. They had 6 times as much of this biomarker in their blood than the control did. And yet there was another group that we looked at, those who were in active care with a psychiatrist, who were having suicidal ideations but didn't act upon them, but yet were having the thoughts. They had 3 times as much of this biomarker in their blood as the control group did. Well, now we need to multiply that and scale that up into a larger group so that we can stratify this data, right? But that's what we're seeing is that there is a direct correlation between this protein and suicidal ideation. So we've developed this scoring system that we call the Campbell Score, and we actually are doing a pilot clinical study in an actual clinic right now, where that physician can order this blood assay to be done by us. And we're going to do it on a pilot basis, because this is diagnostic work and we kind of need to get the kinks out before we could roll it out. Well, we'd like this test to be available to every psychiatrist out there, every healthcare professional, because it isn't just the psychiatrist. You know, the orthopedists and oncologists, their patients get suicidal too, right? There's all kinds of doctors have patients who are having these issues. It isn't just in the mental health arena, but certainly that would be where we'd like to start, where we think we'd have the greatest impact, right?
Will there ever be a time when it's a home test?
I think it's possible, right? I think it's more than possible. You know, right now you can wear a blood glucose monitor, right? And pass your phone in front of it and it'll give you the readings. Yes. Well, there's no reason why we couldn't monitor this protein, right? So in fact, I think that is probably more real than not, right? But everything has to, make its way through there. What's exciting to us is that it's specificity with sensitivity. In other words, down to very, very minuscule amounts of this, we are measuring and making these determinations, right? And it scales up from there. So for us, though, diagnostics is not the answer, right? We need therapy. And the therapy that's currently in use could be enhanced by this. In other words, you could do more targeted therapy if you really knew what you were doing with. See, I don't know about elsewhere in the world, but in the United States, the practice of psychiatry in the medical profession is the only field that the physician doesn't have to monitor the organ that they're treating. They're not doing blood samples on their patient to see what kind of inflammatory molecules are in their brains. We want them to, because they're missing something really. And we're not saying they're bad guys or they're negligent, or it's not that. It's just that we've discovered something here that's noble, and it needs to be looked at by people who are actually in this field every single day. We're a bunch of nerds with microscopes and, lab slides, right? Well, we're not, but we are. but it needs to be put into practice. And that's why we're working with one clinic right now to at least kind of proof this on a scale that we then could maybe roll out. Because we think that there is no reason that someone should struggle with these things when it's biological. When we can, so for us, it isn't enough to have the diagnostics. We have also developed all the therapeutics that go along with this, both immunotherapies as well as regenerative therapies. In fact, we've coined a new term here that we call it regenerative psychiatry, where we can treat neural degeneration with for example, a dendritic cell. Dendritic cell being a very potent immune cell. And at the same time, treat the brain with stem cells to regenerate neuronal cells that have been damaged, right? So this is all frontier stuff, and we are pioneering this. And, we realize that it's very controversial what we're doing, but it's time that we have a paradigm shift in mental health. And if nothing else, this pandemic has brought it into great highlight, because when we have little boys and girls that are thinking about killing themselves when they ought to be thinking about their next soccer game or their friend's sleepover that they're going to do or their next camp out, there's something terribly wrong. So then what is generating all this immune response that can produce these levels of these inflammatory molecules that can drive a person in that direction? Well, a lot of it can be environmental, right? Some of it can be genetic in origin. It can be dietary, right? So we think that immune health is really the best thing for mental health. If you have really good immune health, you're going to have really good mental health at the same time. Gut health is also really, really important because there is an absolute direct connection between the gut and the immune system of the brain. One controls the other and the other controls the other. And when one is out of balance with the other, you're going to have dysbiosis somewhere, right? You're going to have dysfunction somewhere. So, I think that the answer is more immunological than pharmaceutical. And it's time that we take a new look at this. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I got my genetic status 10 plus years ago now for the Huntington's disease, the first thing I thought is, how am I going to be well? Without the help of the traditional schools of medicine, because I got taught there's no cure. Yeah. So come back and see us when you're symptomatic was exactly what I got told by the neurologist. And so why I want people to know about that and to think about it is because you don't necessarily need to be in the care of a psychologist or a psychiatrist in order to notice in yourself that you're having thoughts or feelings or whatever that are not serving you. So that is one. I know a lot of people will say to me, that thought came out of the blue. I never imagined that I would think about harming myself. But when that thought crossed my mind, it was like a total shock to me. It took me by surprise. And so then I didn't know what to do with it, because I thought, well, there must be something wrong with me. I must be crazy and I better not tell anybody. So what you're saying here, Tim, is so important, is that this starts in your brain. It is not a spiritual misfunction that people have. It's a biological thing that can be resolved without a doctor's note, and bless the doctors, all of them, but you might not even be able to get in to see a doctor right now. I know for us, like I've been on the waiting list to go and see my neurologist for well over a year. And I just keep getting the messages, and we have a family neurologist because Huntington's disease, you're assigned somebody. And it's just like, I keep getting you're on a wait list, and so we'll see you later. So in the meanwhile, while people are having symptoms and they're going, well, I can't get in to see my doctor, I can't, I'm not seeing any practitioners, take heart in this information and take away the knowledge and wisdom that is here in this interview as well, which is that this is a biological problem, and biological problems can be repaired with solutions that do not have to be that complex.
And they don't have to be toxic either.
And they don't have to be toxic.
Right? No,
let's talk about that.
That's a big concern of people, right? Because you see the ads on TV, you have this or you have that, and they tell you all the wonderful things, and people are playing tennis or they're riding a horse or they're golf. They throw all this B-roll in there.
They're frolicking.
And then in the end, a guy in a very rapid voice says, but all these things can happen.
Yes.
Right. And they list off this long list of things that are potential side effects of that. Well, first of all, I'm glad that they do that and they tell
Yes.
people that, and they should, and by law they have to, at least they do around here. But it makes you stop and wonder, what benefit am I getting if these are all the potential risks? Because you've told me I have one benefit here with taking this drug, but you just named off like 20 bad things that can happen to me. Put that on the scales. Now, listen, some things people don't have a choice with. I get that, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some people who have to take a drug and it is the only drug and it keeps them alive. So we don't want to poo-poo things like that.
No.
But by and far, what you and I are discussing today are things that in a lot of ways, we're not talking about broken bones. We're not talking about cardiovascular heart failure, right? Or your liver is failing. And even in some ways, there's things you can do to improve all of those things. We're discussing general immunological health and well-being, right? What can we do to boost our immune systems? We can take these things like vitamin C and D and zinc that you've heard people talking about, that we should boost our immune systems during this pandemic. Well, what's so special about the pandemic?
Right.
Shouldn't we do those things all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when we start questioning our health, and we question it in our mind first, did I really feel that? Did I really just kind of almost faint, or whatever the thought, I stood up to, was that just the blood rushing to my head, or do I've got a blood pressure? These thoughts, when something like that happens, we instantly have thoughts about it. Most of the time, there are inner thoughts. We don't blur it out to the person next to me. Whoa, I just stood up too fast and all the blood ran to my feet, because we're kind of like weirded out on it. You've experienced that before, right?
Yes.
But we don't
Definitely.
at that moment then think, well, gosh, I got to go jump off a bridge.
No.
That's a different thought.
That's
right?
right.
When does that happen? That happens when you kind of start ignoring those other things, those signals that you're getting, those flags about your health, and you continue to ignore them. And then your health.
Let's talk about how common it is, Tom, in the general population, because I think this is one of the important pieces too, is that at one time it was about 1 person in 10, or 1 person in 100, or 1 person in 1,000 that would even have these thoughts. It would be such a surprise when somebody committed suicide. It was just like, holy woo. And now it's become this very common thing, and the projections for it becoming more and more common are horrifying. Can you talk a little bit about that? I was just looking at a
study, and it was it showed in adolescents, because they're kind of the least of, they have the least resources, if you really think about it, right? Our teens and our adolescents. Adults have resources, right? And they're on their own, and they're kind of acting as adults, and they should do adult things. But kids, on the other hand, can get inward, they can alienate themselves, and all this kind of stuff. They don't tell their parents what's going on. Teenagers, man, it's a wreck. But they looked at this and they found between the years of 2018 and 2019, there was a 20% increase in adolescent suicidal ideations. It's now projected that between 2020 and 2021, which we're in now, that there will have been a 40% increase. Well, wait a sec. What is driving that, right? It can't that can't be a mass psychosis that is manifesting into a mental health issue among adolescents. It's not. There's something else going on, right? Is it less exercise? Is it less playtime? Is it they're locked up in their parents' house and can't get out because we're in a pandemic? Because look, we're talking about this new 20% increase in just a year's jump, right? Where's that coming from? These kids aren't necessarily sick in their houses and all of a sudden have inflammatory diseases, right?
Right.
What is driving this? Well, believe it or not, you can self-perpetuate these inflammatory processes in your own mind by having some of these negative thoughts in the first place. They can produce these. I was off the air before you and I began. I was just telling you of a paper several that have been published that show when you take somebody and put them out into a natural setting, like in the mountains or in the woods, and they're left there just to enjoy the peace of that for a day, and you measure their blood, we find what are called natural killer cells in their bloodstreams. Normally, those only come out when things are bad, when you have pathogens in your bloodstream, and they will kill, or viruses or bacteria, they will kill those things. Why are they coming out? It's because people are feeling good and their immune systems are feeling good. But likewise, they've done the contra to that, and they took a similar group, put them inside of the city, and they measured before. And by the way, these are before and after blood draws, right? They knew what levels were baseline. And what they found was something like an 8 times increase in inflammatory stimuli in their blood after simply being in an urban environment for 8 hours. So we've got to think about,
right? It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
It's like look around yourself and go, where do I spend the predominant amount of my time? Where do my children spend the predominant amount of their time? Like really ask yourself that question, because it's like the surprise of going, whoa, we spend 80% of our time in the office, in the house, or it may be even more depending on where you live.
By the way, breathing generally recycled air.
Right.
Recycled air. And we're on artificial light. Now they have good lighting now that can kind of mimic natural sunlight. They certainly use them in hospitals with babies who have jaundice, right? And they can take care of that jaundice. So that's really a cool thing. But it's still not the same as going out into the environment, walking on the beach for an hour and breathing salty air. Everybody loves driving by this beach and smelling that seaweedy smell that comes up, right? It's like, oh my gosh, Kramer, put it in a bottle and we'll call it perfume, right? Whatever. But so something is going on there. But at the end of the day, it's all biological. It's all immunological. And there are things we can do to just eat better, exercise better, take supplements where they're necessary. I make supplements. I'm not saying that every human being out there needs to take our supplements or they're poor custodians of their own health. That would be a terrible message to say. But what we make available will help you in obtaining good immunological health, right? And that's the whole purpose of it. But it isn't the be all end all either, because you got to look, you can take all the vitamin C from the CVS you want to, right? In caplet form, that's great. But you've got to eat an orange once in a while. You have to, right? So you understand what I'm saying? You can't just live on supplements. You've got to also have some comes from nature. And where nature maybe falls short in your diet, that's when you use supplements, right? But we should all be trying to eat better and all of these things. And I do think that that when we isolate, and remember, there were people who were isolated. Not everybody is married with a big family and kids. There are lots of single people out there who were isolated throughout. Yes, who've been isolated through this thing. Having too much time on your hands is never a good thing. So I hope that everybody who was isolated and didn't have people around them at least found productive things to do in their time, because if you don't have productive, that can get at you, the world, because you're neither exclusive in Canada nor are we exclusive in the US. The world has experienced this really weird thing, right? I mean, let's face it. We haven't seen anything like this in 100 years since the Spanish flu, right? So who was prepared? Mentally?
I think that I was at an absolute advantage because of having the Huntington's disease diagnosis, a decade plus ago, because I was already felt isolated. So I was already doing lots of stuff to be well. And that people would look at me like, you're a freak, you're a complete anomaly. At 53 years old and a grandmother of however many, you should look a lot older, you should be a lot more tired. But it was because I had that need to isolate 11 years ago,
Yeah.
because who was I going to talk to that would understand lifestyle as medicine? Nobody wanted to hear that.
Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah.
nobody
No,
wanted to
listen,
hear it at all. So here I am now going, lifestyle as
but
medicine.
because of your disease, you became very self-educated, highly
Yes.
educated. And I've discovered this, that you take parents who have a child with some disease,
Mhm.
those parents become more expert than their physicians. They know more of the medical literature than they've read all the papers. That physician's read 2 or 3 papers. They've read 300, right?
Yes,
They can
they've got
sit
skin in
down
the
and
game.
tell that guy facts that he doesn't even know exist, right?
Mhm.
When we do that, that's kind of, that can maybe be a dual-edged sword because we learn too much about our disease, right? And then it freaks us out. But the point here is
Mhm.
you learn where you need to make adjustments in your life to have a better outcome of those things, right? And sometimes you have to go it alone, like you.
Sometimes you do. And and I've been blessed to have kids, and that the whole, and being in the counseling background, lots of people who have had suicide ideation too. So I do want to speak to the supplementation a bit, because I think people get frustrated and stuck. They don't know what to do. They can't get out of their own dark thinking. So the parents are experiencing that. The kids are experiencing that. You end up with 2 generations or 3 that are compromised through their compromised immune system. So whether that's dietary or lack of exercise, or just hanging out with a bunch of people who are negative Nellies all the time, can create that non-health in your body. And so you might not be just dealing with yourself and your own thoughts that are dark, or your own cognition that isn't that great. But you might be dealing with an adolescent, or you might be dealing with a parent that's also compromised, because they're not in alignment, they're not in harmony. How do you tell that you're in alignment and harmony? You have clear thoughts, an open heart, you're grounded, you feel centered. But a lot of people don't feel even like they have balance in their physical body.
Yeah.
Never mind their
They
mental.
lost the spring in their step. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's something, you know what I'm saying? When you got your spring back in your step,
Mm-hmm.
you know you're firing on all cylinders. You have those mornings, you step out and it's like zippity doo da, zippity day, right? It's like everything's going to be beautiful, like but then we have those days that aren't so like that, right? Well, I think that there are certainly our supplements in the form of Quadrimune, in the form of Projuvenol, and in the form of nanostilbene.
Mm-hmm.
These are those 3 products alone or together. We have customers who take all 3, sort of a shotgun approach. I think it's a little overkill on the pterostilbene because of metabolism issues, that you're getting too much in those 3 different things. But for example, taking Quadrimune and Projuvenol together is a good mix, because you're getting actually 9 different anti-inflammatory, antioxidant ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, just taking Quadrimune, or just taking Projuvenol, or just taking nanostilbene. Nanostilbene is the one with a single active ingredient. The other 2 Projuvenol has 5 active ingredients, Quadrimune has 4, nanostilbene has 1. And realistically, on a scale, for the particular inflammatory molecules that we are talking about, nanostilbene puts it down. Mm-hmm. They put those in, and we're talking specifically interleukin-6, we're talking tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNFA, they call it, C-reactive protein, CRP, they call it, interleukin-17, these kinds of inflammatory cytokines. Nanostilbene just wipes them out. But so does Quadrimune. Quadrimune has one additional benefit to it, and that is it has a very beneficial effect on lung health, right? Mm-hmm. So there are people that take Quadrimune who are asthmatic and say, I haven't even needed my puffer lately. It's not, I guess what I'm trying to say, it isn't so much the shotgun approach, but these particular ingredients that I'm talking about, and let me just name some of them, like pterostilbene, alpha lipoic acid, curcumin, sulforaphane, epigallocatechin gallate, thymoquinone, all of these active ingredients do something really, really well. They are donors in reactive oxygen species, so they donate their own themselves. They sacrifice some cells in place of your own cell walls, right? So you get that benefit. They're anti-inflammatory because they can inhibit the immune system from the proliferation of inflammatory molecules. And so so it isn't shotgun approach. All of these work on different pathways and different metabolic pathways of the immune system, because it isn't just an immune system as though it's one single entity in there. It's made up of a vast host of inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, and inflammatory molecules. The key here is to wrangle them like they were a herd of cattle, right? Not a herd of cats.
I'm a farm girl, so I can totally relate to that.
You get that, right?
I get it.
So I think for mental health purposes, the getting your immune system in check and reducing all of these inflammatory cytokines that can be present in this model is in everybody's best interest. Yeah, I'm biased. I'm pushing my own product, but I mean it with a sincere heart, because we're kind of seeing things right now that should tell everybody our mental health has been taking a beating in this pandemic that's been going on now for what, 18 months?
Yes.
It's a long, long time, right?
Very long time.
And I'm sorry to say you're not going to eat enough oranges right now to make a difference. You're just not. There's a there's a time and a place. You and I have talked about that bell curve of nature and how we get these same molecules out of nature, but we get them in a natural way with all of the other things that are present in the orange pulp as we chew it up and we eat it, right? The enzymes that are in there, the other protein, all those things that are in there that we metabolize, we get all of that benefit. But what I'm saying is you can eat a whole sack of oranges right now, which are really great for your immune system, but they're really not going to help your mental health as well as taking Quadrimune every day. And I mean that with all sincerity.
Yeah, and I say that to people as well when they ask me about the supplementation, because I never took a supplement. I haven't taken any and I haven't promoted any. I've had this podcast on for 5 years and I've been a trainer and coach for 30. So other than the occasional protein thing, which I would say when I was training really high level athletes because they needed to increase their caloric intake.
Yeah.
I've always said, chew your food. But the deal is, really with is that I noticed in last fall, kind of November, December, that my executive functioning, I felt like it wasn't quite what it used to be. Even though I was following my usual Qigong and my, the things that I've done.
But you had that moment where you recognized something.
Had the moment and went.
You're not, listen, that's not enigmatic, what occurred with you. You know what I'm saying? You're not Leaha the enigma who had the soul thought about this. We all do at some point with something, right?
Right. And I didn't have a solution. So I went, what is going on that I can't actually, it was like something business wise. I went, what is it that I can't actually get my thought onto the paper clearly anymore? Writing it down. I went, because of the Huntington's going, I'm very assessing all the time, right? I'm just, aware and assessing. So going, all right, well, what could that be? What can I do about it? So, I tried my Qigong for my brain stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And then went, this isn't working. And then just met somebody along the way that said, oh, like, take a look at this thing, this information. And then I looked at it and went, holy smokes, the patents that you guys have out and that you continue to take out more and more patents and do more work around this whole brain health and brain gut health. And that, so then I got on the Quadrimune to start with, and I'll just show a little. So I tried the Quadrimune to start with, felt a little bit better, and then went, hang on a minute, if I've got this thing in my brain and that I actually want to overcome it and restore my brain, what would be the best thing to do? So then I tried the nanostilbene, and the nanostilbene is like an oil product, like 1.5 mils under the tongue. And it doesn't taste that awesome, but whatever, because I am
spicy.
It's oil, right? So you kind of go put it under your tongue. It's a very small dose. But definitely I noticed like if people look at a video of me from pre-Christmas or watch and now, I'm sure that you physically can see my skin looks better. My eyes are brighter. My hair is like longer and curlier, more curly. I'm probably making more sense than I made a few months ago. And so
It's
you
really
will,
good to hear.
thank you. Yeah, it's a really, and so when people ask me, what do you do? I used to say, I do Qigong and I do genius biofeedback and a couple of other little, and I hang out with cool people and I don't watch a ton of TV and I spend time in nature. But I've added this into my regimen because what I want is not to just exist. I want to have a spark in my step all the time because because it feels good to be this enlivened human being, excited about my life, happy and confident.
Zippity doo-dah is a good thing.
Zippity doo-dah all day, all day.
Right? It's a good thing. We all want that zippity doo-dah day feeling, right? Where it's like nothing could go wrong. It's, the birds are chirping and the breeze is warm and it's sunny and it's
right. And it's possible. And it's possible.
It is.
So, and I think that people really don't sometimes think that it is without doing, either punishing exercises or taking medication or whatever it is, because runners will get that euphoric feeling, right? So when I say
we're the worst, we're the worst. We will attempt to regulate and legislate ourselves into misery.
Yes.
Into being absolutely miserable, right? We're really great at it. We should just, put ourselves in the, in the Old Town Center, they used to have the stocks where they put people in. Yeah, we should just do that, right? Because that's about what we're doing when we regulate, or we're just dead. We're at a standstill. No,
right.
Find something that you enjoy doing, right? And take good care of your health. Now, listen, we say that there are people who are unfairly born with really poor health, and that we're not neglecting them or things, that's different. We're just generalized people who have generally, good health. Otherwise, maybe, look, I don't think that we're a world full of crazy people that if we don't get inflammation under control, the whole world's going to commit suicide kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because there are people who have very hard lives, who are very sick and have serious immune problems, right? Yes. And yet they stick it out, right? Maybe it's because they got a great support system or a great husband or a wife or a friend or whatever. But generally speaking, most of us are going to live pretty well in our lives, be fairly healthy for the most part. But as we age, everything begins breaking down. And the more we can do to take care of ourselves early on, there's your longevity, right? Mm-hmm. We're trying to fix it at 85. We maybe got here a little late.
Yeah. I'm seeing people though younger and younger, Tim, that are experiencing these complex health problems.
They are.
And so, I was just over having coffee with a friend before we got on our interview today that has MS. And, she's in her early 40s and there's loads and loads of people. And maybe it is Alberta might be a microcosm of that. I haven't done enough research to actually honestly say, but there are pockets of people throughout the world that are suffering with different, we'll call them maladies. But it's like people are thinking there is no solution. There's no solution for me and no amount of coaching is going to change anything. And I say, I couldn't agree more. You're 100% right, because the issue is biological. It isn't your willpower. It's that you've got this biological thing going on. So
there are, in fairness, there are things in biology that we're at a roadblock with, right? Mm-hmm. There are hard obstacles to overcome because the human body is very complex, right? And there are complex processes going on in there. There is a gene that we all have called NLRP3. And that gene, if it gets overexcited, the word we would use is acetylated, becomes activated, it can secrete into the human being something that is called an inflammasome. An inflammasome is think of it as a bundle of inflammatory molecules that attack you and attack your organs and attack your cells and your tissues. And you can't just gene splice NLRP3 out of humans, right? We haven't figured out how to take that out of humans, so we have to deal with the aftermath of NLRP3 being activated. Well, there's several things that deactivate NLRP3, and you've heard of them: vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D, azithromycin, Z-Pak, quadrimune, nanostilbene, projuvenol. All of these things do one thing, and they do it really well. They deacetylate NLRP3 and can put that inflammasome in check. That inflammasome is responsible for most inflammatory diseases that are present in the body. I'm talking about cardiovascular disease. I'm talking about diabetes. I'm talking about cancer. I'm talking about secondary infection from SARS-CoV-2. See, a lot of people are really focused on COVID-19, which is the disease of SARS-CoV-2, right? SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. The disease that it gives you is COVID-19, at least that's what it's been called.
Right.
But there is another disease that some people get from COVID-19 called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. These patients, many of them die. The majority of the deaths related to COVID-19 are ARDS deaths. The patients literally drown in their own lungs, right? Well, what's really driving that ARDS is not the COVID-19 infection. It's a secondary infection that comes from the same virus that activates. There's a gene in the SARS-CoV virus known as open reading frame 8, ORF8. ORF8 listen, in SARS-CoV-2, there are 29,903 nucleotides in its genome. There are 12 present that matter. The rest are waste. Out of those 12, only 4 actually assemble into the living virus. So the remaining 8 we would call accessory genes. ORF8 is an accessory gene. It doesn't turn into anything. It's just a single gene of protein. But yet that gene, out of all 29,903 that are present in that virus, only it can activate NLRP3. SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 doesn't activate NLRP3, but that does. So there's a secondary infection going on. So what I want to say is most of the people in the world right now who have inflammatory diseases they've been diagnosed with, they have diabetes, they have cardiovascular disease, whatever it may be, they have pulmonary fibrosis, they have emphysema, they have bronchitis. These are all inflammatory disease processes. The mediator of all of that is NLRP3. So we haven't found a way yet to take that out of human beings. That'd be a problem because who knows what the downstream of that complex is, right? Upstream, we know what it is, but we don't know downstream. And so what we have to do then is deal with the aftermath. And that's a lot of what we do at TSOI is we deal with this. We just don't talk about it because it's very complicated and complex for people to get their minds around. What are you talking? What are you meaning? There's a single gene in the body that is responsible for most of these diseases. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I can show you thousands of peer-reviewed papers to prove it. Thousands of them on every disease I've spoken about, right? In all of those disease processes, if you could deacetylate NLRP3, you'd have a lot of the battle won. And so it isn't always, so we may have if we think of tone level, our it's actually NALP3 that obtains tone. And what I mean by tone is it's either kind of aware or it's subdued, right? It's either active or it's retarded, one or the other. And when it's sort of on an active state, it doesn't take much to trigger it. It's like putting the last drop of water in a glass and now you have a little overflow.
Yes.
Well, you don't know where in that glass that overflow, because it's all mixed together, where it came from, do you? All you know is it came out of that mixture. And that overflow is diabetes. That overflow is cardiovascular disease. That overflow are all these inflammatory processes that I'm talking about, right?
And mental health.
And mental health, absolutely. So it is, it's very, on one level, it's very complex, the immune system and all of its various functions, but bringing it down to earth where just us can understand this, if we just do things to increase our immune health, think of that rather than thinking of suppressing something. Think of how you can strengthen it, right?
Right.
Look, we have some pain. We want to suppress the pain with an analgesic, right? We want to put a patch on the pain. When we were little and we got a boo-boo, mama put a Band-Aid on the boo-boo, and miraculously, it got better and I quit crying.
Right. It wasn't mom.
Well, but wait, it was, right? It's the placebo effect. That is very valid, right?
Yes. Yes.
So if we think positive too about these things, and I'm certainly not trying to supplant placebo into our listeners' minds here, but what I'm saying is, if we have a bad attitude about the food we eat and the things that we're taking to try and make us feel better, maybe that's not so good. Maybe we ought to have a good attitude about it. See, there's nothing wrong with going, ooh, fish oil. I know people. I have a friend of mine. He's a Swedish guy, lives in Sweden. And I'm telling you, he gets up every morning and he takes 2 big giant, not spoons, not tablespoons, ladles, 2 big ladles of cod liver fish oil every morning. Nice. And you don't even want to work around him. He's a scientist. You don't even want to be around him because he smells like fish oil.
Fishy.
But his attitude is what matters, you see. He isn't cussing it. He's enjoying it. So I think we also got to put a little bit of that, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine
go down. And we're taking it out today with us musical folks.
We are. I'm kind of, that way.
Absolutely. No, and this is important, very important point. I said, I wanted to be well, and that was my goal. And so I think this is the shift between managing illness and actually being well. That's the point of mastering your life, is really figuring out how do I be well? Does this make me feel better? Does it enhance me? If not, then why am I?
How's that management going, by the way?
Yeah. How's the management going, by the way?
Versus, doing something to resolve it, right?
Yes. Restoring.
Honestly, if you break your leg, the doctor's going to resolve it by immobilizing it for 6 weeks or 8 weeks while that bone heals, right? There's not much more you can do about that bone healing. Oh, sure, there actually are. You can do stem cells, you can do platelet-rich plasma, you can do all kinds of things to speed up the process. But we kind of got that one figured out. You know what I mean? We know how to mend a broken bone pretty good. Right. What we really don't know that well, we do here, but we, the world collectively, we haven't learned how to take really good, care of our immune systems, right?
Yes, exactly.
We take care of most other things. We pay our bills. Believe it or not, that has an effect on your immune system. If you're stressed about your bills because you can't pay your bills, you're stimulating inflammatory processes in the body. But don't we all? I don't like writing checks.
I love writing them.
To pay my bills, I don't, but I do. And, it's just, so, I'm probably my own worst advocate there is what I'm kind of saying, right?
So on the next
we can't have it all down pat.
That's right.
We can make big major improvement things, right?
Exactly.
We may not be able to get all the little minutia things, but we can do some big things. Go for a walk in the woods once in a while, right? Go to the beach once or in the desert or whatever you like, right?
Exactly. And if you're stuck, check out the supplements. We're out of time for this episode, Tim. Thank you so much for being my guest. And make sure you check out the other interviews that Tim and I have done together. And there will be more upcoming in the future about suicide prevention, treating Parkinson's. So make sure that you tune in, folks. And Tune into the show. Check out masteryourlife.ca to check out the supplements, check out other podcast interviews with Tim for this awesome information. Tim, thank you so much for being my guest.
You bet. Thanks for having me. It was great. See you soon.
Yeah, you bet. Invite you all to love yourselves, love each other, mind your minds. That's all for us for today. Bye for now.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.